What's going on, FA Nation? Happy Monday, and welcome to the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS live stream. I am James Grande. Across the way, John Impemba. Behind the scenes, we have Matt Sells. Big shout out to Matt Sells for producing tonight's live stream. John, what is up? 7 games. You were the man of the playbook tonight. Very interesting game totals. A boatload of significant injury news that we're kind of still waiting on. So how do you feel about everything that we've gotten so far and just the slate in general?
I mean, I'm happy we at least got Blake Griffin being ruled out.
Right.
The Andre Drummond news is obviously interesting as he was ruled in, and then he was considered a game time decision, and then he was available but may not play, which is our favorite update of all, is being available but may not play. Because his cost on DraftKings at 9,300 is just like an amazing number for him without Blake Griffin against Washington. Like that is, maybe like the number one price per dollar play on the slate if he's active and actually on the floor. But I mean, they're saying he's going to try some contacts to help with his vision. So who knows? Maybe he gets out there and he plays for 10 minutes. He sweats. The contact starts singing. Actually, no, he's done. You just can't get on the floor. That's a big investment, salary-wise, to pay. So, unfortunately, I think I'm just out on Drummond altogether, which could very well hurt me if I'm playing, single lineups. If you're playing 150, for sure, go ahead and throw Drummond in one. If you're doing the 20 max, maybe you throw Drummond in one. But I can't, recommend doing much more exposure than that. And then, of course, we're waiting on the Devin Booker news. That's going to be big. Late-night hammer game, 9 p.m. At home against Portland. If Booker's ruled out, you get a big bump sort of to the rest of that offense there, especially Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre, and whatnot. So we probably won't get the Booker news prior to lock. So on FanDuel, I think we're going to be kind of SOL there. But on DraftKings, at the very least, you can have the late swat option.
Weird to me that FanDuel ruled him out yesterday, and then suddenly he's game time decision today. What do they know that we don't, John?
Well, he says that he feels so much better. So maybe that's what happened.
Well, we can talk about Devin Booker when we get there, but let's hop into the point guard position. As we always do, we will run through position by position. And again, starting at point guard, there are a couple names up top that we'll just go through quickly that you have in your players that you like but didn't make the playbook. Damian Lillard, John Morant, DeJounte Murray, and Patty Mills, and Jalen Brunson over on FanDuel. Why don't you quickly give a rundown of those 5?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I like Lillard. If you're getting, that game stack with the late night hammer, going up against Rubio is still a really good spot for him. I know we typically like Lillard more at home, but game flow and everything that goes into this matchup, I think Lillard has potential for a ceiling game. Just a little bit, I think, too expensive for me. I'm not really looking to pay up at point guard tonight so much. So, there's no Westbrook written up. Not that you can't play him, but again, just not somebody that I have sort of as a core focal point of my lineups today. John Morant, again, I think he's in a good spot here going up against, Miami. But, again, not somebody that I'm really focusing in my lineups around, but I like his upside. I like his role, the minutes, and he's been really strong play. DeJounte Murray, Patty Mills, we went over it on the podcast last night with Sean. Murray has had sort of a 30-minute game, a 17-minute game, a 30-minute game. Who knows what's going to happen here tonight with him. If he's in the starting lineup, I like Murray a lot more than I would if he's out of the starting lineup. I think maybe that's the indicator. Derek White started the game in which he only played 17 minutes, and Murray started the game in which he played 30 most recently. So
Andre Drummond out. Officially ruled out.
Wow.
Officially ruled out.
Huge news right there. I mean, apparently the contacts did not work for him. So, yeah, I mean, that's big. I have Derrick Rose in the playbook. Huge bump to Derrick Rose tonight. And now, of course, the value that opens up with both Blake and Drummond ruled out tonight. I mean, it's a 7-game slate, but you just fit Harden in your lineup pretty easily, or Giannis, however you want to go about it. But, yeah, Murray, if he's starting, I like him. Patty Mills is playing 30 minutes seemingly regardless. I think there's just a safe play for you if you want to go in that sort of mid 4K range. Good spot here going up against Houston. They're going to need some of his defense, so Patty Mills is fine. And then I put Brunson as a FanDuel only play because he's 3,700 over there. 55 on DraftKings, I'm not paying that spot for him. I'm a little less bullish on him than I think a lot of people are today. I know the usage rate's pretty solid and the fantasy point production has been good without Doncic on the floor this year. And I know last game he had a huge night with Doncic after he was out. But I worry a little bit, like J.J. Barea is back. Dalen Wright was first game back the other night. He only played 9 minutes, but I have to assume he's going to play more than 9 minutes this go around. So, we could see a minutes decrease for Brunson tonight. And that's just something that worries me a little bit more for DraftKings pricing. Again, on FanDuel at 3,700, it won't take much for him to hit value. So go ahead. But I also think, again, you may not need to go that value tonight if you want to use some of those Pistons guys.
Just for the record, Jalen Brunson, in our last ownership update, the highest projected owned player over on FanDuel. So if you want to play him and with the rest of the field, he'll be highly owned. The rest of your point guard position, I think it's perfectly logical that we just go right to Derrick Rose. Just considering, is he now, in your eyes, one of the best tournament plays of the slate?
I think it's certainly possible. I mean, if you want to just look at fantasy points per minute and usage rate in a large sample size, mind you, because, again, Rose is somebody that comes off the bench, so he's typically playing without these guys anyways. A 35% usage rate this year, 1.62 fantasy points per minute. That is like Harden-esque, Embiid, like all those top plays in terms of usage rate and fantasy points per minute. Like you get above, that 1.6, 1.7 area, that's huge. And again, that's what those two guys both off the floor. Now they're off the floor the entire game. So Rhodes, he doesn't start still, but again, he is in a great spot. Now we're talking about a game against Washington. Isaiah Thomas is back tonight, going to play 24 minutes. What if Ish Smith gets subbed out? Isaiah IT comes in, and then Rose gets subbed in. Now you have Rose against IT with that type of usage rate. I mean, he's going to tear him apart. So DVPs, I was already high on Rose in a lot of my lineups. This just further cements that for me.
The rest of your point guard breakdown, we have the likes of Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, once again ruled out. Ricky Rubio, we don't know the status of Devin Booker as he still remains questionable. Chris Paul against the Chicago Bulls. Kendrick Nunn continues to be without Justice Winslow and Goran Dragic. And a nice little value play in Dante DiVincenzo, who's point guard, shooting guard over on DraftKings, shooting guard on FanDuel. Let's break down the rest of the position, John.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we're just looking at the guys there, Nunn has a good spot against Memphis, 6K range, that's fine. Dante, he started the other day. Again, I like him more on FanDuel at 4K as a shooting guard than I think at 46 on DraftKings. We still, came out with solid pricing there. Lowry against Cleveland, if you want to spend up, I think that's fine. I do worry that there is a potential blowout possibility in this game. They're in Toronto. Cleveland has been blown out at times. They've managed to surprisingly stay competitive in other contests, but 12.5 point spread here we're looking at. So that's a little bit limiting, but no, Fred VanVleet's not in. So more power to Lowry in that aspect. I mentioned Rubio. Obviously, if there's no Booker, that's a big, huge boost to him. We saw him, with a big double-double the other day with Booker ruled out of the lineup. This year he's already flashed 50-point upside multiple times, 50 fantasy point upside multiple times this year. Good spot against Portland. And then I mentioned, Chris Paul was somebody that I want to say, maybe we have forgotten a little bit about, or you and I maybe have forgotten a little bit about, because he started off the year playing just horribly. But you look at his recent production, last 5 games, 41 fantasy points he's averaging. Now he's going up against the Bulls. I know Chicago defensively has played better against point guards this year, but I mean, you're getting a nice, low price tag here, I think, for Paul, given his recent production. So I'm a big fan of Chris Paul tonight as well. Yeah,
he's shown a really nice floor recently, as you mentioned. Just for the public to note, we are currently updating our projections with the recent Andre Drummond news. So stay tuned for that before roster lock. Moving over to shooting guard, James Harden, that's the play. I mean, you and I have been screaming it from the rooftops over the last month. It doesn't matter who's in the lineup next to James Harden. Is he your top play tonight?
Yeah, he's my top play. I mean, it was funny, the other day in chat, we're not to knock everybody, but they were a little worried about, Harden and paying up for him, and they still went for 80. It's like, oh, he's playing Orlando. They're a better defensive team. They play slower. Watch out. He still went off. I mean, if you want to knock him for going for 60 against, against Detroit, I mean, I guess you can. The DK app did have a snowflake next to his name, but he scored 39 actual with 6 and 7 in that game for 60 fantasy points. He can't go for 80 every night, but few people have a consistent 60-point floor. He's averaging 63 DraftKings points per game on the season as an average. So now you're getting the spot against San Antonio. They're not great defensively. He went for 78 against them in that overtime game a couple weeks back. I mean, yes, I trust Harden home against San Antonio in a game more than I trust Giannis in his spot here at home against a Dallas team without their best player. I think there's blowout potential with Giannis. I would much rather spend up for James Harden today.
The rest of your shooting guard breakdown, we have Jimmy Butler in a really nice spot against the Memphis Grizzlies. DeMar DeRozan on the flip side of that Harden matchup, which we've seen already blow up for 260-plus points once already this year. Dennis Schroeder for tournaments, most likely. And Dylan Brooks, where are you going? Who are your favorite plays? I mean, I know you have them all written down, but is there any one specific that stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think, I like DeRozan a lot. We cover of the optimal lineups, example lineups today. It just makes a lot of sense. If you're going to game stack, especially to have DeRozan come back at you. He's been scoring really well lately. He has that upside. They don't defend that position well, so DDR makes a lot of my lineups tonight, both cash in, GPPs. Butler, again, fits both molds. He's more expensive. Probably going to have a lot less ownership, I think, now that there's value. People definitely looking to spend up and fit Harden in their lineups tonight. But, I mean, Memphis, pace up spot for him. He's been doing it all. He's been forced to play the 40-minute tonight. He's shown triple-double upside. I mean, hard to just look at Butler and not really, consider that he should probably even be maybe a little bit more expensive than he is. Schroeder's somebody that, I've been talking about all year. Ever since they traded Westbrook and George, I felt like the usage rate, there's going to be so much usage to go around because Paul wasn't that type of player. And I mean, Schroeder's done nothing but produce. He's averaging almost 30 fantasy points over his last 5, under 6K, which means you're getting more than 5x value just based off his current averages. I think Schroeder's in a great spot. And then, of course, Dylan Brooks, as we said, somebody that I always, you and I both always kind of tout. And then if we're going up top, shooting guards that aren't really written, but I like Bradley Beal, good pivot play off of Butler, I think. Zach LaVine, he's healthy, good spot against OKC. They're not really defending the shooting guard spot. He's been popping off a lot. And then again, Middleton, very solid without Bledsoe. Again, I just maybe worry about blowout factor.
Moving over to small forward, we can play Giannis. I think you made that pretty clear. Up top, it's probably going to be a blowout without Luka, but if it stays close, you can get 80-point upside from Giannis. And the rest of the position, we have Pascal Siakam, who is 100 different positions depending on where you're going to play.
I've listed all of them for your viewers.
And you listed all of them, but over on FanDuel, he is still listed at small forward in a really good spot against Cleveland. Kelly Oubre, why don't you take us through the rest of the small forward position? It's a pretty strong position tonight, I would say.
It is. It's not bad. So at the top, obviously, you have Giannis. You don't need a reason not to play him, but again, he has had a hard time, playing all the minutes that we expected him to hit his ceiling because they've just been blowing out everybody. So use him as a contrarian, play to Harden tonight. Troy Brown Jr., again, he's been getting minutes off the bench, very kind of up and down, but he's a player that doesn't need a lot of, doesn't need to score to get you fantasy points. The other day, he didn't hit a shot, hit 4 free throws, and got you 25 fantasy points. So that's just kind of, something that he brings to the table. If we're looking at guys that I did write up, we have Siakam, obviously a good spot against Cleveland. Kevin Love, not a great defender. Siakam's been going off. No Fred VanVleet. The usage rate is there for him. We have decent ownership on him tonight as well. So, at least we think he may be a little bit more chalky, which is fine. Oubre, I like him more, obviously, if there's no Booker. Otherwise, I probably don't have Oubre in my lineups today. And I'd much rather play Gallinari. Listed as a small forward, but plays power forward. And Chicago allowing the second most fantasy points to the power forward position. So Gallinari, I think, is in a really strong spot, especially DK. Only 5,900 for him just seems like a very good bargain. And then Kennard, I mean, you want to talk about, guys that have, strong usage rates, 25% usage rate for Kennard without Blake and Drummond on the floor. He's the third highest usage bump with those guys, and he's about a fantasy point per minute. So, Kennard, very solid. And he typically starts. So, I mean, if they don't start Rose as well, you have Kennard basically on the floor without the top 3 scorers on that team, and you kind of, if you want to go ahead and take off, Rose and just go with the starting lineup, Kennard's got a 30% usage rate this year without Rose, Drummond, and Griffin on the floor over an 80-minute sample size. So, Kennard, really great price tag, really potential great upside, given the kind of rotation that they have going on there. Then if we're looking at some value, Tim Hardaway Jr., also 54 and 58, 22 shots the other day with no Luka Doncic. We know from his time with New York and with Atlanta, he has the ability to pop off. His 40 fantasy points the other night really isn't a fluke. That's what his upside can be when the offense is sort of centered, giving him the available shots. So good spot for him. And then value-wise, House 4,300, Derek Jones rather 42. You and I both love Derek Jones. He kind of gives you everything across the board. And if the scoring comes, he's got 35 or so fantasy point upside. And I feel the same way about House. We've already seen him go for 30 fantasy points a bunch of times this year. Priced all the way down, starting again, 30 minutes. So those two guys coming back in game stacks, I think, work out perfectly.
Yeah, Jones Jr. on FanDuel, especially lately, with the steals and the blocks, has been tremendous. Some we don't have in the playbook, and with this news, I just want to get your take. Bruce Brown Jr., without Drummond, without Blake Griffin, any interest there? Point guard, shooting guard over on DK 4,500, shooting guard on FanDuel 4,200.
Yeah, it's fine. Again, it's weird, and you and I talked about it. He had a huge game the other day, and obviously you can't argue with that type of production. But was it more of a fluke? Was it a product of the matchup that they were in? You look at his overall numbers this year. His usage rate isn't really very high, even with no Blake and Drummond. It's about a fantasy point per minute, so that's fine. I don't know. I think you can do it to be contrarian. I don't know if everybody's going to be jumping to Bruce Brown, but, he's there. Again, I think, as you mentioned in chat right now, everybody pretty much in Detroit's now in play. So, he's $4,500. Yeah, against Washington, knock yourselves out. Is he going to get all those rebounds again? Maybe it's possible. Is he going to get 4 steals again? Maybe it's possible. But, those are counting stats that you need to see from him to get, 40-point upside.
You talk about product of a matchup. There aren't many better matchups than Washington. So
sure.
Just throwing that out there. But let's move on to power forward, where Kristaps Porzingis is likely the chalk, considering we don't have Luka Doncic. If that game can stay close, obviously Porzingis more in play. At the top here, we have Porzingis, Aldridge, and Kevin Love. Do you have preference one of the three?
Yeah, LMA is my favorite of the group. Again, just getting that matchup going up against Houston. I understand the love for Porzingis. Obviously, again, we're talking about a player with a tremendous usage rate in fantasy point per minute, 33%, 1.52 fantasy points per minute without Luka. But going up against Milwaukee, which means he's drawing Giannis. That's his defensive assignment, on both sides of the floor. So we already know Porzingis has been terrible with foul issues all season long. Is the Greek Freak going to give him 3 fouls in 8 minutes? What's possible there? Is he going to be able to get his shot off down low with another true 7-footer, hanging over him? So I'm more down on Porzingis today than I will be in the future matchups that he has coming up when there's no Luka. I think today I fade Porzingis. I definitely go to LMA. I think he's been strong when active of late over his last 7 games. He scored less than 37 fantasy points just once. So you're getting really good production here in a good spot against Houston. I think Aldridge is fine. And then Love is a good GPP dart. He went for 30 and 17 against San Antonio a couple games ago. If they keep it close, it's because Kevin Love is having a really good game. And Siakam, not a great defender. He's not Kawhi Leonard on the defensive end of the floor. So Love could be in an okay spot.
Moving down the list, we have Davis Bertans, who continuously comes off the bench, but that does not hinder his performance at all. And I actually love your Dario Saric call for tournaments. I don't think many people are going to play him even in that juicy matchup against Portland. And then for value, we have Christian Wood. And I'll even throw Markieff Morris in that equation, too, if you want to talk about him, because, obviously...
Markieff's written up top, so he's mentioned. And again, all those plays are contingent on Griffin and Drummond being ruled out. Wood only played 22 minutes the other day, even with everybody ruled out. And, of course, he gave you 30 fantasy points because he's just a fantasy point per minute monster. So you can definitely use Wood if you want. But Morris played more minutes. He played 27 in that game, and he's getting sort of the revenge narrative and he's cheaper. So I feel like I trust Markieff more in terms of like a floor level of production than Wood, just because, we're not seeing that minutes. Like if I could guarantee Wood starting tonight and like, oh, he's starting, maybe he's going to play 25 to 30, then I'd be more intrigued. But if we get a starting lineup out, they're starting like Zvi and like Markieff, then, I don't know if I can go and trust that Wood's going to play a bunch of minutes.
Right. I would go Morris and Cash and Wood in tournaments. I think you spot on there. Moving on to center, rounding out the bunch. We did have Andre Drummond. Obviously, that is no longer the case. But we do have Hassan Whiteside, Steven Adams, Jan Mahimi, and Marc Gasol. Who do you prefer in Cash? Who do you prefer in tournament? I actually know who you're going to say for Cash because he was the cover of the playbook today. And he has been the best samurai warrior in the NBA over this past month.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I'm not saying people are sleeping on him, but I've been playing Steven Adams at like pretty low ownership now for a while. People just haven't caught on, I don't think, or they look at his name and they don't think he's sexy because of years past. But again, everything I liked about Schroeder, there's a ton of usage going on that's open. On that team now that there's no Westbrook and George. And it's not that Adams is, taking 20 shots a night, but he's consistently giving you rebounds. He's consistently giving you the blocks. He can pass the basketball a little bit, and he is very efficient around the rim. So, $6,700 is just unfair. Is a great price tag for us. He should be probably over 7K. I mean, averaging 38 fantasy points over his last 5 games. Now he gets Chicago, who is allowing the most fantasy points to the center position. And it's not by a little. They have almost 2.5 full points more. And you may say just 2.5, that's not a lot. That's an average. And 2.5 is a pretty big gap when you're talking about averages and comparatively across the whole season. Usually these are fractions of numbers. So, Adams against a Wendell Carter tonight, I feel like Adams is just going to crush. So, I have him in both GPPs and cash games tonight. If you wanted to pivot in your GPP lineup, Whiteside, obviously, because you're going up against Phoenix, they're starting Frank Kaminsky. And I mentioned in the playbook, we're always talking about this is the best spot against centers, One, there's a lot of teams that suck against centers. And that's basically what we're finding out. But these are really the creme de la creme teams that go up against, Phoenix, Washington, Charlotte, Brooklyn, and Chicago. Those are the teams that we see on the schedule. And when they're up against a good center, we salivate. So you want to go ahead and go with Whiteside by all means. Adams, for me, cheaper, doesn't have the 60-point upside, but he can get you 40 to 45, I think, pretty easily in this spot.
And that Phoenix defense will only get worse with DeAndre Ayton returning. And, John, doesn't it just make you feel warm and fuzzy to see over Steven Adams' last 5 games, 30 minutes per? Yeah. And that is not something that we've seen for the beginning portion of this season. Marc Gasol, he's been really rolling. 40-plus
Marc Gasol won me a lot of money the other day. Again, matchup against Brooklyn. And I pointed this out on the podcast. I didn't even just mention the Clippers in that rant I just had, but, everybody's like, oh, man, Gasol's back. He's back. He's he might be back, but he also just played Chicago, the Clippers, and the Nets in 3 straight games. So we shouldn't be too surprised they went for 39, 39, and 47 fantasy points.
Right.
However, another guy that's playing over 30 minutes a night again, which is, fantastic. Even with Ibaka back, they've pretty much solidified his role, minutes-wise. And this is the Gasol that we were seeing last year. I don't need Gasol to give me 30, actual scoring. If he's going to give me 10 in 10 with, 5 assists, blocks, and steals, he can get you 40 fantasy points pretty easily. Right. Cleveland, maybe not the best spot. I consider Kristen Thompson to be, a decent, post defender. He's not going to, he's not a great shot blocker or anything, but, he's a bigger body. He can kind of keep guys around the paint, but you're still getting $5,800 for Gasol. That price tag's only going to go up, I think. So this is, again, if you want to be contrarian, I started 2 centers the other day, and Gasol was in my util in that game in which he went off for me. So I'm not afraid to do that again on DraftKings.
Cleveland does allow the 11th most fantasy points to the 2 opposing centers. So we do have that working for us. So, John, it is 6:31. You do have lineups to adjust with the Pistons news. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just, again, keep your ear to the grindstones. Find out if Booker gets ruled out and make some adjustments. But, yeah, we'll be in chat to answer the rest of the questions as we go to roster lock. Again, kind of a smaller slate, 7 p.m. start. 9 p.m. is the last game, so we'll know if we're winning money before we go to bed. So that's a plus.
Again, big thanks to Matt Sells. And we are out, and we will catch you guys in the winner's circle.